because my dad's from Poland.
Right.
And my mom's from Germany, which is a weird mix as it is. And I was like their excuse for a green card, basically. They dated for a long time. Because they met, I think it was like late teens, early 20s or somewhere in there. And then they waited a few years, but Babcia didn't meet my mom until like 6 months before the wedding. Because my dad's like, how am I going to explain to my Polish Catholic mom that my girlfriend and wife is a German? Like, oh my God, could you imagine this?
Sleeping with the enemy, right?
Sleeping with the enemy, exactly.
My today's guest is Marek Wawrzyniak. He's a born American but with Polish heritage, and he lives for the past years in Krakow. He's a host and creator of Kraków stand-up comedy, a weekly English comedy show, and he's a great guy with a lot of really interesting stories. So stay tuned. Mark.
Hello.
Great to have you here.
Great to be here.
I was on your show yesterday. That was Krakow stand-up comedy night in English.
Yep.
And you are organizer of this, right?
Yes. Yeah. Kraków stand-up comedy was founded 4 years ago almost. Basically, there was an open mic in Kraków organized by another comedy group from out of town. And I met Ashley Keith and Richard Lucas. And we were like, Kraków needs regular stand-up. So we started with an open mic in Dobry Kumpel on Floriańska. And then it grew quite quickly. And then we moved over to Szpitalna 1. And it was going strong. And then about maybe a year and a half ago, it kind of really got huge. Ashley moved back to Australia because he's Australian. And I brought on Holly Ann Blay as our production manager. And we just increased in numbers. It just exploded. I mean, before we kind of treated it as a hobby. And then we realized with all the people coming and how many people were interested, we're like, we need to treat this like a business.
Oh.
And so I try to separate like the personal, because you meet so many cool people that are fun and crazy, but you still have to, there's a distance I have to keep right now.
Right.
Because it is a business. Like the comics, when we were doing the open mic, it was 8 people. You
Most
could get
of
on
them
stage,
were comics, right?
Yeah, you could get on stage, you could do what you want to.
Right.
So comics were just kind of like, I love the attention, I love stage time. But now my focus is my audience. And we're trying to give as many experiences to them that we possibly can.
You have a banner and everything now?
We're branded now. We've got our Facebook. Like us on Kraków stand-up comedy. We're working on the Twitter. I don't even know why we do this social media, but you have to do that, right?
Right. So there is a show every Sunday?
Every Sunday at Szpitalna 1, which is by the Mały Rynek, the small square.
Ministerstwo.
Yeah, right, exactly. It was the old Ministerstwo, and now it's
I used to work there as a guy.
Did you? What year was that?
I was on the street and I tried to invite people there. I was terrible job. I was one of the first guys. That was like 7-8 years ago.
Okay.
So I was the first annoying guy.
That's after my time, because I studied at UJ in the early 2000s, and I remember going to Ministerstwo like somewhere in that time.
Right. It was a very popular club.
Yeah, it was a really cool club. Not the best one, but definitely
not the best one at all.
Definitely cool.
Yeah. So you got this open mic at Sunday?
Well, the open mic at Szpitalna is the first and second Sunday of the month. The first and the third Sunday of the month. The second and the fourth Sunday of the month, we have a headliner that we bring in from around Europe. We've had comics from the US, from all over actually. From Australia, we've even had comics. And then if we have an extra Sunday, if there's a fifth Sunday in the month, it'll be a special event, either a special headliner show or sometimes a showcase. Then once a month, we have an open mic at Artefakt in Kazimierz. We started that, I want to say, March or April of this year. Right. Everything mixes. And I think that's usually the third Wednesday of the month. That sounds right. And then we have a new show, which I'm really excited about, at the same venue where you were at last night, Stand Up to the Dragon. and you've been to it.
Yes.
It's awesome.
Well, that's Wawelski, Mr. Wawelski.
Mr. Wawelski, Gołębie 6.
Gołębie.
Yeah, so not far from the main square, and that's kind of like a gong show, like X Factor meets open mic. And comics. I love this show. We started it, I think it was May, was our first one. And we had just started at Artifact, and then they called me from Mr. Wawelski, this guy Mark Bryant, who does the like music entertainment for the venue, and he said we'd really like to have English comedy here. And I was like, well, we just expanded to a venue, you know, this is gonna have our hands in a lot of different things. But I walked in, I was like, okay, I'll meet you guys. I walked in, and above the stage was this huge metal dragon. And right away I was like, does that thing breathe fire? And they're like, no, smoke. I'm like, okay, that's good enough. And I knew right at that moment, I said, yes, we're going to do comedy here, but it's going to be a different show. And I said, I want that dragon connected to a button that I'm going to stick on a table. I'm going to pick judges from the audience, randomly selected. When you get your ticket, put your name in the hat. And the audience gets to judge the comics. The comics have 1 minute, right? They can do their stuff, and they're safe for that first minute. But after that, bam, dragons turned on. And if the comics don't relate, or if somebody from the audience is like, smoke them, they've got a button, and it's like the X from X Factor, except it's a huge cloud of smoke. Yeah. And I think it scares the comics.
Oh yeah, it does scares the comics. How this idea came up? Because it's brilliant. It's from X Factor.
I knew if I was going to start another comedy show, it had to be something different. Like we've got the headliner, which is different from the open mic at Szpitalna. The open mic at Artifact is different because it's less comics, but they have more time, and it's a more intimate venue. It doesn't really feel like a comedy club necessarily. I keep hitting this mic.
No problem.
It doesn't feel like a comedy club. I mean, they've got a stage, but you can see everybody. Everybody can see you, and that's not necessarily good for comedy. It's better if it's like a dark, intimate setting. The stage light is on, but the audience is, hidden in the darkness, because then they laugh more. Because, comics say inappropriate things, and people get really oh, I've heard, and people get really nervous. One of the worst shows I ever did, it was in Katowice, and we were it was with two of my friends, Christine Scobie. She was based in Warsaw. Now she's Canadian. She's back in Canada. And Andy Sosnowski, and he's based in Warsaw. And we were doing this 3-person show. We go to Katowice, and it was a nice bar, but there were too many people that came. The venue could hold 40, and it was like 60 some people. We're like, uh-oh, what do we do? And they're like, we have a room upstairs you could use. We're like, okay, fantastic. So we go to this room. There's this stage. It looked like something. I mean, it looked like an old communist, like a place where like you'd meet, like, I don't know, Stalin or something. Like, the lighting was terrible. You could see everybody. They could see you. So when some of the inappropriate jokes came, everybody would kind of like cover up, stare, like who's laughing, who's not.
Like in Stalin era.
Yeah. So it was a bit of a challenge. I mean, it was a good show. It was just, it was the strangest venue to do it in. And that's Artifact, it's very well lit. So that's a different sort of a show. And then if I was going to do another show, it has to be something completely different. And as I said, as soon as I walked in and I saw this dragon, I was like, I knew exactly. Once I figured that this thing can breathe fire, it's like done. And they're like, oh, okay, that sounds interesting. I'm like, it's going to be called Stand Up to the Dragon. And like, how did you just come up with that? I'm like, I don't know. It just bam, popped. As soon as I saw it, I knew.
Stand Up to the Dragon.
As soon as I saw it, it's a great name, right?
Yeah, it is. But you are from States?
Yes, I grew up in Chicago. Well, right. Outside of Chicago. I say Chicago because if I say the actual place, people think I'm from Scotland. Because it's Glencoe is where I went to school. Okay. Which is north of Chicago.
Okay, but it's Chicago.
But it's Chicago.
Let's say Chicago. Yeah. But you live in Krakow now for how long?
This time since 2011, May 2011.
So 8 years.
Yeah.
And you start your comedy career because you are also host of all of these shows.
Yes.
And you are doing a great job. You have great crowd work and It's great to be asked for a stage after you just warm people up.
Thank you. Well, that's my job.
Yeah, exactly. But you didn't start. But you start doing this stand-up comedy here recently, right?
Yeah, I mean, a few years back, like, I think the first open mic that was organized by the other group, it was in maybe 2016, somewhere around there.
So 3 years ago.
I think it was about 3. I want to say it was 2. I can't even remember. But there was an advertisement, and it was like, you know, stand-up comedy, if you get on stage, you get a free beer. I'm like, okay, free beer. I'm not going to say no to that, right? Like, I got a few jokes I can use. And then the audience responded well, and I was like, okay, well, I'll keep getting a free beer and doing this. And that's how it started. I did perform at some of the open mics in Chicago when I was there visiting. It's a different crowd.
Right. Yeah, there's the big tradition of stand-up comedy in States.
Yeah.
It is brand new in Poland, right?
It's been here for a while. I mean, the traditional Polish comedy is the cabaret type thing,
yeah.
and, you know.
Which is,
not stand-up.
Right.
Not stand-up, let's say that. But yeah, there is the tradition. I mean, it's very competitive, I guess, in the States. Not that it isn't here. It's starting to get more and more competitive. But it's a different crowd. Because here, when you're performing in Europe, it needs to be very relatable internationally.
Right.
And there you had a lot of like sports jokes. I was listening to some of the other comics. They're talking about sports, American sports stars, politicians. And I was kind of just, I didn't know celebrities that
Right.
Maybe I read the name like online, but I'm like, I don't know who these people are. I don't know enough that I'm going to find this funny. And you really can't do that here. I remember I was at Cosmic Comedy in Berlin. Oh, one of my favorite comedy clubs. And I was performing with another comic from Poland. And there was a guy from the States, from New York. And he came and he was performing. And he did all these like American political jokes. And Kamil Grichka was with me. He leans over. He's like, who are these people? And I'm like, I have no idea who. I mean, he wasn't like, you know, if it was the president, he'd be like, okay, that's easy. But it was some random secretary of, I don't know. And it's like, I can't even help you on this.
Right.
So if I didn't know that, I don't think, you know, a lot of people like necessarily care enough about U.S. politics.
Right. I think it's great. My favorite kind of comedy is universal, like when you trip over something, and that's the joke, because everyone trips no matter where are you from.
Right.
Right.
Well, I mean, you know, like one of my favorite things to talk about are my grandmothers.
Yes.
Right? Because everybody has a grandmother,
right.
And at least one of them has to be crazy, because I think that's just the way it works.
Yeah, that's the balance.
So, you know, no matter where you're from, you can relate to this kind of humor.
Yeah, and always grandmothers are conservative because they are like 80 years old. So no matter where they're from, compared to you, they are more conservative compared to you. So they have like view of the world that is from different era. So it's always
a different
relatable.
view. It's a different viewpoint.
Right.
Like babcia, because my dad's from Poland,
right,
and my mom's from Germany, which is a weird mix as it is, and I was like their excuse for a green card, basically. But no, babcia, she was very conservative, super Catholic. She had a really rough life, though, so I totally understand where she was coming from. She died when I was younger, and that's like my biggest regret, is that I didn't know her more. I would have liked to known her as an adult.
Right.
She was always, I mean, she was so loving to me and to my brother, you know, but like to my dad, it was a little different relationship, because that was, you know, her kid. And, you know, it was great though, because we always had grandparents, like either babcia or my German grandmother, Oma, living with us. So my whole life, you know, there was a higher authority than my parents in the house, which was, I have a twin brother, which was great, because when we would get in trouble and mom or dad said no, we were like, okay, who's above them? Like, okay, we're going to go to their boss. So we go over into babcia's room or into Oma's room, and we'd be like, listen, mom and dad won't let us do this. And then, of course, grandmothers let you do anything.
Right.
So it's really good to have that dynamic.
Yeah, that's amazing. You told me that both of your grandmas are from old Europe, but one is from Germany and one is from Poland, and they were both born before the war.
Well, babcia was born in 1911.
So even before the First World War.
Yeah, and Oma was born in 1916.
So also like during, right?
Like during, the First World War. And so that, they remember the Second World War. My parents were born in 1942. Dad's April, mom's September. So they remember as children the war, bits and pieces. Like there's certain things that stick in their mind that they just can't forget.
What
traumas.
What time they moved to States?
Oh my God, I couldn't even tell you at this point.
But they were kids, they were adults.
They were a bit older. Yeah. And then like my dad he studied at the Sorbonne in Paris at one point. Mom was living there as well, and
so they meet in Europe.
I don't know the whole origin story for a lot of this. It's like they met, that was before my time, and I'm like, okay, good enough. I mean, the funny thing, whenever they talk about meeting, like their big story because they do tell you like the things they share. It was mom, they dated for a long time. Because they met, I think it was like late teens, early 20s or somewhere in there, and then they waited a few years, but Babcia didn't meet my mom until like 6 months before the wedding, because my dad's like, how am I going to explain to my Polish Catholic mom that my girlfriend and wife is a German? Like, oh my God, could you imagine this?
Sleeping with the enemy, right?
Sleeping with the enemy, exactly. So they waited, and then after they did get married, they waited forever to have kids, because let's face it, like, when you're young, your parents are like, I love you, but kids are a pain in the ass. Right?
Yeah.
So they were smart. They're like, we're going to have a life. And for the time when I was born, I mean, my mom had us really late. And I'm glad they had that time together to be like, why are we going to bother with kids? I don't know if they planned it, but they were adventurous and they did their crazy things. Tons of great stories from them. Especially like right before we were born, and I hear some of the stories about when they were in, East Germany, former East Germany, and in Poland, and like it's like sounded like a Cold War novel. Some of the crazy things they did, and I was lucky because I had been when I was younger. I was in East Germany. I was in Poland before the wall fell, and I saw what it was like. I remember the borders as a kid. That was really interesting.
I'm sure it was. So you didn't start doing comedy in Chicago. You started here.
Yeah.
But you told me a little bit yesterday about your previous occupation.
Okay.
Could you maybe tell something more about that?
I don't know if I want to get into that. No, basically, I was in a completely different field. I had studied in the sciences and physics.
Very noble.
Yeah.
Thing.
I mean, well, I think there was a lot of pressure from maybe I put it on myself, but I always felt like I didn't want to disappoint my parents.
I heard a thing about first generation of immigrant kids that their parents, most of them becoming doctors and scientists.
Right.
I mean, if they are,
like
able
a doctor,
enough.
lawyer, scientist.
Yeah,
that's
exactly.
it.
Like engineers, not scientists, engineers,
right.
Doctors, engineers.
Yeah, you've got to. I mean, they made such sacrifices to get to the States, so you've got to
right.
do something. And I just wasn't happy. Like my brother's a genius. Like he's a professor. I'm trying to remember his doctorates. What are they in? Microbiology, neuropsychology.
Wow, that's awesome.
Yeah, and he loves it. So it was like, okay, at least one of the kids, is doing something useful. And I think it was last year, 2 years ago, he got pulled in because he's at the University of Miami, and he got pulled into the HIV research group because he had some great experience with infectious diseases. And, one of the higher up professors noticed his work and pulls him in. And so he's literally, working, curing AIDS, disease. And I'm telling jokes in a basement.
Well, but all this, entertainment business and entertaining people is, it's not quantifiable, right? But it's really, really important.
Well, they
because-
say laughter is the best medicine.
Yeah.
I just don't know if it's going to cure AIDS.
Yeah.
So,
but beside that's you said that this stand-up comedy it became very serious, so
Yeah.
you treat it like a second job, right?
right now it feels more like a first job. to tell you.
Really?
Yeah. I spend most of the free time on that. It's so much more because right now I'm teaching English, native speaker, so cool,
Obviously,
right?
in Krakow.
One of my biggest clients, because I don't have, I don't work for a school or anything. I just have private clients, and my biggest client is probably AGH.
AGH?
AGH.
Oh yeah.
Technically, I wanted to say that in like the American accent.
Right.
So, and I, I've got some professors that are my students. I've got the administration. No students, just the people who teach and have to deal with the students.
Right.
Because they also need to obviously learn English. And it's really fun working there, I have to say. I really like all the people. I see how, 'cause when I'm teaching at corporations, and I'm not going to name any of the corporations, you see some of the students and they just, they've been working at these massive corporations for a year, and you just see there's no soul left in them. There's no life. And I just feel
There's no spark in that.
There's no spark. It's like you're 20-something and there's no spark left.
Too bad.
Yeah, I feel awful, but the university is a great environment, and the students I have there, they're always happy, it seems. So that's kind of cool.
Cool. So this is your day job, and after
Yeah.
hours you
Do comedy.
Yeah.
But now with social media and the phone, I'm constantly on that thing, because comics will write to me. We used to have to invite people to come, but now the comics find us and they're like, "Do you have anything open?" Like right now, we're booked through the end of the year. We have all our shows lined up.
Oh, really cool.
Yeah. So you got to if you're a comic, book with us early, because
It's getting crowded.
Yeah, and we have a great reputation. I think that's our reputation, and the experience is the biggest draw. Obviously, if you're coming from a place like Berlin or from any Euro country to Poland, you're going to be earning in zloty here, and that doesn't convert necessarily very good going in the other direction.
Right.
Right. So the comics, if they come here from the Euro countries, like they're not going to get a huge payday. I mean, it's huge money for here, but it's not like they're going to lose money sometimes if they come, especially if they have a show, let's say on the weekend, that they're earning money, and then they don't get that, and then they have to fly and all this. But I've really pushed to make it an experience they can't miss. So like if you go to Berlin, and there's so many comedy shows there, and you just talk like, oh, can you recommend any other places, or there's somewhere you'd like to perform? Like if you talk to the Cosmic Comedy people, like, oh, go to Kraków. That's an amazing experience. And they're constantly coming over. They're constantly, writing, and it's so much fun to have them.
Cool.
Yeah. So it's about the experience, and our audience is very gracious.
Yeah. What about the audience? Is it mostly expats? What's the percentage about expats, Polish people speaking English, tourists?
It's a mix.
It's a mix.
Yeah. Like for example, I would say we at least usually have about 40% Poles. Our comics that perform, like yourself, in Polish. I mean, in English, but native Polish speaker. So we have a lot of those comics as well, which is really cool. The rest are expats, mostly that are working here. We do have tourists, but it's not as big as the people that are here. Like it's a pretty consistent audience, but very international. I mean, at the beginning, because when our comics come, I want to make sure they know who's in the audience, who they're going to be able to talk to. So it's like, if they have any jokes, that they're going to direct at somebody. So I ask, where are you from? Where are my Ukrainians? Where are my people from Great Britain? Where are the Spanish? And it's a huge mix. It's a huge mix. Excuse me. Trying to figure out how to drink this water gracefully.
With this mic. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I already figured that out. There was another thing I wanted to ask you. So Yeah, so you changed your life basically 180 at some point.
A few times I've done that.
A few times, yeah. But you came to Krakow, you quit your old job, you came to Krakow and started doing stand-up comedy.
No, I started this was long ago. This was back in the early 2000s. So this was long before I started doing comedy. And I studied at UJ. Like this is after because it was a good job that I had in the States. And I'm like, I don't want to disappoint mom and dad that I'm getting out of sciences. So I enrolled at University because I knew my dad would be like, oh my God, he's going back to the home country.
In the oldest Polish university.
The oldest Polish university, and he's so impressive. And I think it confused them long enough where they were like, okay, but he quit that really good job. But I was like, okay, if I can make them proud for just a few minutes, then I'm good to go. And then I came over here and studied here, had a great time. And then I made a really poor decision and I left Kraków.
And go back to Chicago.
No, I actually went to Germany.
Oh.
So the thing was I followed a woman. Oh. Don't ever do that. Don't ever do that. Don't ever do that. I thought, okay, I'm going to, calm down, settle down a little bit. And we moved to Cologne, Germany, which it's got a nice church.
And that's all.
There's carnival. So.
Once a year.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah.
I've been there once.
Okay. Well, then you've probably been there enough.
Okay.
Yeah, and then after that, we moved to Brussels. And
Brussels is beautiful.
Yeah.
But it's like beautiful, like a postcard beautiful, right?
Yeah. Like there's not. I mean, it's nice, but at that time, I wasn't into European politics. Like I wasn't working in that field at all. And my ex, she was a lobbyist. So it's like if you'd go to parties and stuff, everybody was just like passing cards and trying to network and trying to get to that next thing. And I couldn't give a shit. Like, I'm like, okay,
right.
Like, can we just relax and not work after work? Like that's kind of the point. And of course, you don't meet anybody from Belgium in Brussels. It's just nothing but expats over there.
Right.
Like I think I knew one Belgian guy, and that was it. And then we broke up, and after that, I went to the States for a few months just to like clear my head and be like, okay. And then I thought, okay, where was the last place I was really happy? And it was Kraków. So I came back, and I should have never left. That was the biggest mistake I ever made.
So how long you were off Kraków that time?
So left, that would have been 6 years I was away from Kraków.
Okay.
Yeah, 6 years.
And you came back 3 years ago.
Yeah.
Right?
2011.
Oh, sorry. 3 years ago you started in
that's when I started comedy.
Right.
Yeah, and then when I came back here, at first I started teaching, and then I opened a language school. And that was a lot of work that it was unnecessary because we had different languages that we were teaching. So I was responsible for teachers and all this and blah, blah, blah. And that wasn't worth my time.
Right.
And then I also opened a bar at one point in Kraków with a friend. Yeah.
Wow, that's cool. Where?
I rather not say.
But it's over now, is it?
Yeah.
So why?
You know what? It's off the bucket list. I did it. People are fantastic. Parties are fantastic. The bureaucracy, tax office,
right?
Health
but you have
inspectors.
to outsource all of this.
Yeah, of course, but you're still, responsible for that crap.
Right.
Like I remember when we had the health inspector.
Sanepid.
Yeah, Sanepid, exactly. And she came and she was like, "This is a problem. This is a problem. This is a problem. It's gonna be like 4,000 zloty." And my co-owner was like, "Well, let's start to negotiate." And then I think she left with like 600 zloty in cash, and as long as it was in cash, everything was okay. That was not okay before. It was just finding stuff, and then there's just this negotiation.
Yeah. Yeah, that's the Polish style.
They scare you with this huge number, and then when I heard it, at first I'm freaking, and my co-owner's name was Michał. He looks at me and he's kind of like, calm down, don't worry, I'll take care of this.
Yeah.
And they're talking for a while, and then all of a sudden it's like, we had to pay in cash, and it's only 600. Brilliant. So that's one thing. A lot of people complain about it. But you can always get things done in Kraków. You know, it's not like other countries where every single rule has to be followed.
No, not
I
here.
hate that crap.
Right.
Like here, if you need something done, you can get it done. You can figure out a way.
Yes.
You know, and that comes, I think, from the Polish mentality.
Yeah. I've been in Stockholm last summer, and I was there partying at the club. And partying at the club in Stockholm is like being in prison, basically. Because, for example, there is like all the clubs are open till 11 p.m.
Okay.
And there is like 5 clubs.
Like they close at 11 or they open at 11?
They close at 11. There's like 5 clubs in whole Stockholm that can be open till like 2 a.m. And there's like 2 other clubs that can be open to 5 a.m.
Right.
So every Stockholm person, if you want to party after like 2
They all
a.m.,
go to these.
Yeah, these 2 clubs. And then there are these bodyguards who are obligatory, and they are hired by the city. So they are
City
like
bodyguards.
City bodyguards. They're like city police. Huge Vikings,
Right, wow.
but they are like part criminals. But because even in Sweden they have criminals, but
criminal Viking
Sweden
bodyguards.
is smart enough, so they hire them.
Right. Let's get them on our side.
Yes, as a city bodyguards, and they like standing there. You cannot smoke inside, obviously.
Right.
You have to go outside, but there is like one area where you can smoke, but you cannot take your beer with.
Okay.
So it's like the best thing about going for a beer is you can drink a beer and smoke at the same time, but you cannot do it there.
But you can't do.
Yeah.
Now, okay, here's a question. How much is a beer?
Oh, I buy a round from my friends, and it was like half monthly rent for this flat.
I believe it.
Yeah.
I believe it.
Yeah, but that was cultural thing. But yeah, but Swedish people are so strict. They are like playing by the rules.
Follow the rules. Yeah.
It's obviously has its ups because like in Kazimierz when there's like everyone's partying and there are people living there who probably hate their lives because there's like party.
Well, I mean,
yeah, that's I'm partying, so I don't care, but that's the problem for them. In Sweden, those clubs are in areas where there is no flats.
Right. Well,
so no one is complaining about the
But
noise.
if you're going to move into a flat and the area is busy, and you don't want that, then move somewhere else.
Yeah,
I think
that's my point.
obvious,
Exactly.
Right?
That's my point. But people, in Kazimierz, they were living there for like 70 years or so because they have this communal flats.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I get where they come from, but they are such a party killers there, really.
Yeah, I think they could just move. That's happened in a lot of neighborhoods. I have some friends in Berlin. They said the same thing. There used to be some areas, that were great. They had tons of cafes, and then the residents were complaining because more families had moved. And like, oh, it's too loud. It's like, you need to chill. Go live somewhere where there's no bars, and if you want to live in quiet, don't ruin other people's fun.
Right. Especially there are some cities where people visit to party.
Yeah.
Krakow is a city like that.
Kraków is a city. I mean, now it's become too much like that, I think. Like, I don't...
So there is a line.
Yeah. I mean, there is a line. Like, I no matter how drunk I've gotten, I've never, I think, crossed certain lines. Like, I live in the city center. And, they have all these cheap vodka places, right? There's one, and I'm sure that somebody's paying somebody from the city. It's right across from one of the cutest little churches in Kraków. And I have seen, the bouncers, they stand there, but whatever happens right outside the door, they just don't care. Like, they're just protecting the business. And I've seen, drunk foreigners urinate on the church. I mean, that's so disrespectful.
Right.
Like, you don't urinate on anybody's house of worship. It doesn't matter what religion it is. There's certain sacred things that's disgusting.
Right.
Or they're vomiting right there, or they're breaking glasses.
But no, they are just drunk, not on purpose.
No, they're just drunk. They're just drunk. But it's like...
Yeah, it's still...
Even when you're drunk, you got to know where you're... I mean, it's not like it's it's a church, right?
Right.
Like, use a little common sense. Like, don't be, and it's so disrespectful. It just, I can't even believe they still allow that place,
right,
to be there.
I never thought that I hear word disrespectful out of your mouth. To be honest,
really,
yeah. Basically, there are some jokes you tell on the stage that probably some people could say they are disrespectful as well.
For example,
good question. I don't want if I well, the yesterday bit you talk about when you were in Amsterdam sex club, but I don't think it was disrespectful. You just were saying what happened there.
Yeah, no, that was it wasn't a sex club. It was like a sex show. Like, it was a live fuck show. That's how they advertise it. Like, you know you're gonna go in there to see some weird stuff.
Yeah.
But it was really a controlled environment. I mean, that was one reason, because I as you heard in the story, I was a chaperone for one of my friends was working at Jagiellonian.
You were what?
A chaperone. Like, I was helping to monitor the students, basically.
Right.
And it was I was finishing up one of my masters, and basically I was invited to be a chaperone to Amsterdam for the first year students. And I wanted to find something for them to do, but it was like off. This was after hours. Like, we'd done the museums, we've done all this stuff, right? This was after hours. And of course, everyone thinks coffee shops, but there's other crazy stuff to do. And we walked into this place, and it wasn't dodgy at all. You had to pay at the door, and then they gave you a certain amount of drink tokens. And if you wanted to get more drinks, you had to get more drink tokens, but everything was like a fixed price. Everything was very safe. There was no dodgy behavior. Very professional for a sex show. But what I saw there, it was like, oh my goodness. I was I was shocked. You think you've seen it all, and then you're like, oh, I was not ready for this.
Right.
That's exactly that experience.
I've been in Amsterdam once, and all I had was a hot chocolate there.
Okay.
I was in the job thing, so
okay.
I couldn't.
So you couldn't do anything else.
Yeah. But I wasn't in the mood anyway.
Right.
But if you had to meet a lot of comics, so you could invite them here, right?
Yeah. I mean, it becomes a really small world, like in the stand-up world. Once you start to travel, and people, comics will travel distances to get on stage.
Right.
So you're always looking for somewhere to go, and then you just network and you meet people, and you go to other cities, and then, as I said, with Kraków, we've made it into such a wonderful experience. Like, Holly's done a bang-up job with absolutely everything. The comics know her. They're like, oh, she's so sweet, and she's talking to all of them. So everybody knows. You contact Holly. When we went to Berlin, she went around, just was like, oh, I'm from Krakow stand-up, and a lot of people had already heard about us. So, and then a friend says, there's a friend, this comic says, send somebody over. We had one comic last year that was going to come, but then there was some problem with the airplane. The airport was shut down. And Holly's still in touch with this comic, and then he sent somebody else that he knew to us, because very professional. So. Oh,
really cool.
But it's a small world. Yeah. All of a sudden, you start to know everybody.
Right. So, did you? You said you were in Berlin performing there, but did you visit some other places?
Like, where did I perform?
Yeah.
Brno. I've performed in Budapest. I've performed in Poland, Wrocław, Katowice, Warszawa. I already said Berlin, didn't I? I did some open mics in Chicago as well. So, yeah. I mean, I want to expand, keep moving out, but just no time, because we've expanded so much. Like, I would love if I could go every other weekend to a different city, but right now we're just so focused here. I really have to sneak away,
right,
to go anywhere.
So in all those Polish places, Katowice, Wrocław, Warszawa, there are all English stand-up comedy open mics there.
Katowice, it was the 3-person show I was talking about, and that they don't have an established scene. Wrocław has an established scene. Warszawa has an established scene. So there's open mics. I've done headlining shows there. I've done showcases, stuff like that.
Cool.
Yeah, it's fun.
Do you think you could live out of it? You could do it like a professional 100%, only this?
Maybe, I don't know. The audience has got to decide if I'm funny enough.
Right, but do
Right.
you have like do you think about the future and the future of your show and of the Krakow stand-up comedy show?
I would like to. That would be a dream to make a living in just touring Europe, and maybe then eventually the world. But that would be great. I would love to go to a different city every other weekend and perform.
Right.
That'd be really, really cool.
You're not tired of sleeping in hotels?
No, I can deal with it.
It's,
Those are kind of like luxury complaints, right?
Well, I had when I'm getting, maybe not older. When I'm getting older, I noticed that I need like a solid sleep to function.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and I heard, and it's kind of works in my case that when you are in new place, you need 3 days to kind of accommodate. Mm-hmm. So when you sleep like 7 days in a row in a different hotel in a different
Right.
bed, you just don't get a proper sleep
Right.
because you
Well,
need 3 days to.
Yeah, but I mean, nobody said comedy's an easy business.
Yeah, of course.
Right.
I thought so, but now I see
It's real grind.
It isn't.
Like if you're going to do that, you got to be ready for it. You got to be ready for it.
Right. Did you have any like expectations when you start that?
No.
No.
None. I mean, I had the expectation to get the free beer.
That was it. That was
That
all.
was it. That was it.
That's why you are so happy about it, because you don't have like
Yeah, I
any.
didn't. I mean, when I was younger, people were always like, "You're funny. You should go do an open mic or something." I was like, And then just once I started doing it, and to see the response, like, okay, so other people find me funny, not just my friends being polite and being like, "Oh, that was funny." The fact that I could entertain strangers.
Yeah, that's the Jerry Seinfeld said there are 3 stages of being funny. It's like funny for your friends.
Yeah.
That's the first stage. Second stage is funny for other people you don't know.
Yeah.
And the third stage is funny for other people you don't know, and they pay you for it.
Yeah, well, okay, then I've hit stage 3.
Very cool.
Yeah.
So what's the future of the show?
What's the future of Kraków stand-up comedy?
Yeah.
Well, we're going to stay strong. I want to bring in bigger names from further afield, which would be really amazing.
Names like Bill Burr or something like that?
Not that big. Not that big. I would like to open for him. That would be awesome.
Yeah.
But, I mean, you would actually need to more talk to Holly because she does a lot of the production. How big we could get. I just want to make sure that it's consistently a good show. I want to make sure the quality of the comics that we bring in is increasing, for sure. I want that dragon show to like totally explode because it's so cool, such a good concept. I want to make sure the audience is entertained, that they're really having a good time. That people, it would be great if people were like, "Hey, Kraków is a comedy city."
Well, yeah, that would
Right?
be-
Like, because we have so many tourists, and they come here mostly because of the cheap alcohol. If you're from the UK or America,
right.
but it'd be nice if they're
Or
like Sweden, or Norway, or any place. Really,
Not north from here.
right? But it'd be really nice if tourists would be like, "Oh, I want to see all these historical things in Kraków." And then, I want to get some jazz because the city, is also known
yeah.
for the jazz.
Oh, yes.
And some stand-up comedy. Like, that would be cool if that would be associated. Like, if I could leave that mark on this city, that'd be amazing.
Cool.
Yeah.
Do you think there are overlaps between Polish scene and English scene? There are some comics that perform in Polish
And English, yeah.
and English.
Yeah.
Damian Skóra, for example.
Yeah.
David Ngeda. I'm sorry if I butcher his name. There are some, but
Yeah.
is there overlap in the scene?
Yeah, there's some overlap. There's comics that perform both for Stand Up Polska, which is the Polish stand-up group, the big one, and also in English.
Right. You also have a show in Artefact.
Yeah.
Which is there also Polish
there's a lot
comedy lab.
They
there.
do comedy lab over there, which is kind of
But
cool.
you speak a little bit of Polish, maybe even more than a little bit.
Yeah.
But you're not.
Well, you know what? It's funny because like my friends that don't speak English, obviously we speak Polish. And then if I'm at comedy, everything's in English anyway. So if we're like in a mixed group, especially, I don't think it's a great idea. Well, there's two reasons I do it. Number one, if you're in a mixed group and not everybody's understanding what you're saying, people get really nervous. People get really nervous when they're like, oh, are they talking about me? And it might just be a regular conversation, right? So there needs to be like a common language for everybody. And then the other thing, I like to keep it a secret because then I know when people who think I don't speak any Polish are talking about me. Or any other language for that matter.
You had situations like that?
Oh yeah, somebody will say something and it depends. Like if it's something rude, then I respond back in Polish. And it's like,
That's gonna be awesome.
Shouldn't have done that, should you? But if it's, because I mean, I'll speak German from mom, right? But if it's something like nice or somebody's like, oh, I'll just take that compliment and pretend like I didn't hear it.
It's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Is there anything you want to say about yourself or about your work?
I don't know. I mean, I really hope that we become bigger. Krakow stand-up comedy.
It's a pretty good show.
Yeah.
Everyone who speaks English, no matter if you're Polish or not, you're in Krakow, visit this guy at comedy, the Krakow stand-up comedy.
Yes, definitely.
On Facebook, you can
Facebook,
like the
Krakow
profile.
stand-up comedy on Facebook. That's where I have all the events.
Man, it was great to having you.
Thank you. It was great to be here. I appreciate it.
Thanks. And see you next time.
See you next time.